affects essence abilities, innate abilities, and item abilities. Abilities derived from external transcendent sources are affected more strongly. This affliction drops off rapidly when not within the area of the wielder of Hegemon's Will's aura. Additional instances have increased effect. The handful of penance instances left on Melody translated to only a mild suppressing effect. It was still enough that, when combined with a fully suppressed aura, Clive was able to snap a suppression collar around her neck. She thrashed in wild struggle, but both Neil and Humphrey were stronger, holding her in place as Clive locked the collar. Melody slumped, but her face locked on her daughter's. Sophie looked at her mother impassively, then slipped a bag over her head. Neil started shoving their prisoner towards the hole in the wall where water was draining out. Humphrey gathered up Sophie in a hug, while Clive and Jason looked on awkwardly. Being able to sense you working on the other side of the wall was amazing, Jason said to Clive. I don't think I've ever found my aura sensors so useful. I don't think it was strictly necessary, Clive said. One of Shade's bodies led us to you. No, I mean with timing the line you guys entered with. My banter game was on point. Jason's eyes went wide, then he groaned unhappily. What's wrong? Clive asked, and Jason gave him a forlorn look. I just realized she doesn't know what My Little Pony is, he said. She totally didn't get the reference. Sophie looked at him from over Humphrey's bicep. Why would you expect that? She asked. No one ever does. Chapter 35. Nostalgia. When the two gold rankers racing to the underwater mining facility arrived at the submarine dock, they found the surface of the water sealed with a magical barrier, shimmering red with shifting yellow runes. The barrier was only from a bronze rank ritual, so they easily forced their way through. The barrier repaired itself immediately, with the water that came through with them pooling on top of its horizontal surface. Leaping from the barrier onto the docks, they found it full of people. There were no vehicles present, but the dock was lined with anxious civilians. A handful of corpses were piled behind some crates, thick blood trails showing where they had been moved from. The tunnels leading deeper into the complex were all blocked by shimmering magical barriers, behind which the tunnels were flooded with water. Ritualist adventurers were maintaining the barriers blocking the tunnels, as well as the surface of the water where the gold rankers had breached their way in. Other adventurers had opened up portals through which civilians were filing through to safety. The facility staff were almost entirely iron or bronze rank, consuming only a fragment of a silver rank portal's energy with their passage. For every silver ranker that could have passed through, 10 bronze or 100 iron rankers could do so instead. The gold rankers quickly assessed the room, spotting the group that was in charge. One of the gold rankers went straight for the team leader, Corinne Pascos, who was calmly issuing directions to bring the dock to order. The other gold ranker moved to a member of her team, Oren Pensanata. The approach of the gold rankers did not go unnoticed. Waves of relief flooded the auras of adventurers and civilians alike, reassured by the presence of the two powerful figures. Corinne recognized the gold ranker approaching her and hurried to give a report. You're very nice, sir. We were mid-evacuation when the sabotage we were warned of took place. The extraction teams were chosen for having ritualists and water or air manipulators, or had them attached specifically in case of this circumstance. Accordingly, our teams managed to safeguard civilians that were en route to this extraction point. Operations have continued, but at a slower pace. Civilian status? Feringhas asked. Live civilians are either sealed in safe rooms waiting for rescue, en route to this dock, in this dock, or extracted to Rimross via portal. We've confirmed that some have fallen to hostiles, either caught outside safe rooms or in safe rooms that have been breached. Presumably any live civilians caught outside of the safe rooms following the sabotage are either trapped or dead, but until the hostiles are cleared, a methodical search is impractical. Disposition of the hostiles. A large portion of them departed with all vehicles in the dock, both their own and a submarine transport for the materials. According to civilian witnesses that had already been rescued, the adventurer team assigned to hold the dock turned traitor, helping them extract and going with them. Feringhas scowled at the news of traitors. They really were, he muttered. Sir? They didn't kill the civilian witnesses, Feringhas asked, schooling his expression. They did not kill any civilians outside of two who made trouble for them. We believe due to time constraints. Once they discovered our rapid response, and especially once the sabotage took place, they seem to have taken the people they had and the materials they had gathered and left, presumably predicting your arrival. We believe a large number of hostiles were abandoned in the base and are still active. Eventual casualties. Injuries, including several severe ones that proved resistant to healing. No deaths. Many of the enemy have the means to impede healing the wounds they inflict, primarily through variants of silver fire. This is the same fire they were reported as using when encountered during the Builder Island expedition. Yes, sir. We have some people who were on that expedition as well and confirmed it. Our civilian jib were priority evacuated. A large portion of the enemy forces are non-essence users and believed to be victims of the modified clockwork cores seen during the Builder Island expedition. The pure converted, we were informed of. Yes, sir. They are notably weaker than essence users, but the primary source of the silver fire. These pure converted are believed to be the bulk of enemy forces remaining. From what we could determine, the Order of Redeeming Light members mostly assumed lower risk roles in the operation. This allowed them to be notified and react more quickly to our arrival. That said, we believe that at least several teams with essence users made their way into the deeper areas of the complex for reasons unknown. Enemy casualties. Numerous pure converted. We don't have a good count, but several dozen at a minimum. Most of the essence users encountered were not anticipating such a rapid response, and we caught them on the back foot. Silver rankers are not so easily killed, though, so many were able to escape deeper into the complex, including the ones killed that were guarding the dock on our arrival. We have eliminated 14 silver rank essence users. We estimate between 9 and 25 more enemy essence users are still unaccounted for within the complex, along with an unknown number of pure converted. That would be a larger deployment of forces than the Builder Island raid, Feringhas assessed. Yes, sir. My best guess would be that this operation was considered lower risk, as they did not anticipate the Adventure Society reacting as quickly as we have. This may even be the bulk of their local forces. I'm going to reinstitute the capture order, Fellinghast said, but only as a low priority if safe to do so. If encountering the enemy having trouble with the post-sabotage conditions, capture is acceptable only if safe. Otherwise, the kill-on-sight order remains in effect. More than anything enemy-related, first priority is evacuating civilians. No one is to compromise rescuee safety over pursuing enemies. Make sure that all expedition teams are notified. Yes, sir. As Corinne briefed Fellinghast, the other gold ranker went to the person he knew from her team to get his own briefing. Oren was organizing people going through a portal when he sensed his gold rank uncle approaching. His uncle inclined his head slightly back and Oren furrowed his brow. The uncle gave a slight nod and then wandered over to where Corinne was going over specifics of estimated ally and enemy locations on a projected map. Another of Corinne's team members, Rosa, nudged the much larger Oren with her shoulder. You two I was talking to ever, I see? Oren nodded. Given how deep we are in the facility, Humphrey said, I think trying to make our own way out is a mistake. Agreed, Clive said. Using ritual magic to dig through walls and take down barriers, all while managing the water that's been caught up in various sections, isn't practical. Not all the way back to the dock. We might all have equipment for fighting underwater, but conducting rituals underwater is something else. The team had retrieved Jason's bright orange magical swimming belt, which was now secured around his waist. Do we even have the ritual materials to get back up? Neil asked. No, Clive said. It's an outside chance that we could stretch what we have if everything went right, but he gestured at the tunnel in which they were standing in water up to their knees, very deep under the seafloor. I don't think it's an everything goes right kind of day. There's a safe room not far from where we are, Jason said, checking his map ability. We can join the people there and wait to get rescued with everyone else. Jason allowed the others to see his map and plotted out a route using waypoints. That looks viable, so long as the flooding in the intervening chambers isn't too bad, Clive said. Following the deliberate flooding of the facility, all the rooms had been magically isolated. The magical barriers were safety measures put in place to isolate flooding and had automatically triggered, sealing chambers and segmenting tunnels. Only the comprehensive disabling of safety systems allowed the water to spread throughout the complex before the barriers went active. With no appropriate essence abilities to deal with the water, the team was reliant on Clive to either disable barriers or dig through walls. Other chambers and tunnel segments could easily be deeply flooded, which was one of the reasons they preferred negating barriers. They could see through barriers to gauge how much water was in the next chamber, and disabling them was much easier than digging through magic stone. It usually required meters of tunneling to reach the next tunnel or chamber, which they were opening relatively blind. Jason's sensors could reach through one or two walls, but were significantly dulled in doing so. They travelled with Sophie, keeping a tight grip and a tight watch on their prisoner. Melody was not just collared and manacled, but also hooded. It was no ordinary hood, but one that could seal the enhanced perception and magical senses of a silver ranker. At least silver rankers that weren't outliers like Jason. Where did you get that hood? Neil asked to Sophie. From Belinda. Why did she have it? It's not like we knew we were coming to grab someone ahead of time. I don't know, Sophie said. You'll have to ask her yourself. Neil looked at Belinda, who was merrily nibbling on a gingerbread man as she waded through the icy seawater. That's probably best I don't know now that I think about it. They made their way through tunnels along Jason's mapped route. Some sealed sections were all but empty of water, lowering the level in the tunnels they travelled through as they were opened. Others had enough water to raise the level, although that was not the most unpleasant thing the tunnels could contain. The team found themselves looking through an intact barrier wall into a section of tunnel entirely flooded with water. Floating within was a trio of corpses, their lingering auras marking them as iron rankers. We came thus deep into the complex to hide from the purity worshippers, Neil said, watching the floating bodies with a somber expression tinged with anger. Did we take them out of there? Humphrey asked. It doesn't seem right to leave them. I'm not sure it's any better to take them, Clive said. We don't have any caskets. Clive, Jason, and Humphrey shared a look between them. Before they were a team, their first contract together was to retrieve the body of a fallen adventurer. They had been supplied with a special casket to contain the body before it was placed in storage, but it was only a symbolic gesture. When putting a body in a storage space, there was no practical difference between respectfully placing it in the casket first and just throwing it in like a spare sword. The casket accomplished nothing, and there was no contamination within storage spaces unless strange and extremely unusual magic was involved. They all knew that the bodies were empty shells, the soul not being an unproven concept to any of them. Even so, none of them wanted to treat the victims with anything but respect. These people weren't fighters, but had been doing their part to produce essential supplies that helped to save people during the monster surge. They might not be adventurers, but they were comrades. They'll be taken care of when this place is recovered, Jason said. That won't be until after the monster surge, at least, Humphrey said. It might be a strategic resource, but not important enough to undo everything done here. Those people will be down here for weeks at least. We still don't know how long this extended monster surge will last. Don't underestimate what some logistics specialists with water and earth essences can do, Neil said. Neil's right, Clive said. Remember that the Amuse family specialize in dealing with places like this. Not every elite essence user is an adventurer specialized in killing. Jason thought back to his early days in Greenstone, where he'd watched essence users building a public toilet. He'd stood and watched for hours, the friendly construction workers surprised and happy that someone found what they were doing interesting as they answered his many questions. He frowned, uncertain if it was good or bad that his nostalgia was triggered by corpses buried somewhere an oil derrick would have trouble reaching. Let's leave them to their rest, he said, pulling up his map. It looks like the best way to go is actually to drop down through the floor and follow a parallel tunnel, and then back out the other side. Not a bad way to detour, Clive said. If the chamber below is full of water, it won't spill in, and if the one we dig up into is, it can drain down. The tunnel below turned out to be a good pick. The chamber they dropped into had only waist-deep water, even after their original tunnel section drained into it. The next two sections of tunnel were almost empty, so dropping the barriers lowered the water level to barely mid-ship.